All right, and welcome to Flat Earth Civil Discourse, episode 10 with the Plain Truth. This is our second round with the Plain Truth. How are you doing, sir?
I'm well and good, thanks.
I'm sorry, I had to mute my watch page, so I was hearing myself. Um, all right, so yeah. Please introduce yourself to the audience just
Sure.
a few moments, and then we'll jump in.
Yeah, sure. So if anybody sees my icon that I'm on right now, it's my podcast icon for Rethinking Revelation. We talked a little bit about that last time. I've got a podcast on biblical interpretation, and then my YouTube channel that's just meager. It's nothing to even bat an eye at, but I try to add some interesting perspective to the conversation. So my YouTube channel is The Plain Truth. I know that there are a couple of different, I think there's Plain Truth out there and aplaintruth.info. So, yeah, so.
Yes, and he wanted me to tell everybody that is in fact a vaping device that's disguised as a cigar.
No, that is exactly not what I told you to say.
Oh, excuse me, I'm coming off.
Yeah, you needed that. That's right. That's divine retribution right there.
Right. It was a bolt of lightning that tickled my esophagus. All right, so yes, I'm coming off a cold, so I do apologize, and I don't have like a sneeze button. When I teach in a cyber school, and so my headset mic has a little mute button, and so occasionally, you get like this killer sneeze, and so like I've got my microphone, it's a headset mic, so my mic is like an inch from my mouth, and like I got a killer sneeze coming on, and sometimes I'm like fumbling with the microphone, and I've often inflicted my poor students with an uproarious sneeze. But anyway,
Yeah.
so you've been on the Nathan Oakley show quite a bit, and so let's jump into one of the topics. Actually, one of the things that's on my mind is I correct me if I'm wrong, but I just seem to remember you saying something about the moon. I think it was when Dean, who is a fairly new guy coming on, a new Glober, he said that, one of his, like, he was trying to list a couple things that show that the Earth is a globe, or at least that the Earth is not flat. And one of the things is he's going to hold up a white ball against the moon.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And, shout out to Slick James Johnson in the chat. So, and I could be wrong, but I thought you said, oh yeah, I've got a video on that on my channel or something to that effect.
Yeah, Mark Doxey actually brought it up. I probably would have, but that was actually the very first phenomenon that I remember experiencing after my awakening back in November. I was walking through my neighborhood. It was an early November morning. It had snowed recently, and so I was walking through the neighborhood, and I looked up and saw the moon, and the angle of the termination line. Now, again, if you just think about, I'm sure that you've heard this, and I think it's a hammer. I think it's a nail to hit with a hammer.
Okay.
And that is that our senses are to be trusted to a certain extent. You know what I mean? There's obviously we can talk about certain phenomena that that our senses have to be acclimated to. But in terms of depth perception, in terms of perspective and things like that, I think that there's certain things that we are able to figure out for ourselves. So just like the batter can determine when he's supposed to swing when the curveball comes.
Right.
I looked up at the sky and I saw the moon, and the moon was probably at a high 80-degree position. The termination line was, I would say, from 2 o'clock to 8 o'clock if it was a clock face, right? Well, in just natural physics, that would require a light source higher than the moon.
Right.
Right?
When you say 2 o'clock to 8 o'clock, you mean like 2 o'clock or 8 o'clock. So it's like 2 o'clock would be.
If you're going to cut the pie,
right?
If you're going to cut the pie in half, that's the demarcation. 3
Right.
o'clock, 4 o'clock, 5, 6, 7 is gone because it's the termination line. It's in the shadows.
Right.
So 8 o'clock until 2 o'clock is lit up. Well,
Oh,
if
oh, I
the
get you.
sun,
From 8 till 2 is lit
yeah,
up. I get you.
yeah, yeah. So if the sun is the source of the moon's light, then that termination line demands that the sun would be higher than
Right.
the moon. Well, the sun was at 30 degrees off the horizon.
Right. To your
So if you
left.
just simply,
To your left.
yeah,
Okay.
yep, yep.
Now, how did
So
I
if you
know that?
just,
I'm
well, I
teasing.
don't know.
I'm
Well, no,
teasing,
you
but
probably you could figure it out because of the 8 o'clock to 2 o'clock. So it's going
yeah,
to be on the left hand side.
yeah.
Anyway, so all I'm saying is, if you just look at the and I stood there and I'm telling you, Chet, I'm telling you that 5 months before, I wouldn't have thought about it. I wouldn't have given it a second thought.
Yeah.
But I looked up and I thought, you know what? That is not copacetic. So I went out the next morning with my iPhone and shot some film and just made those observations again. And then one of my detractors who came and visited the video said, "Well, if you just look around your neighborhood, you're going to see all the shadows. They're all going to be the same as the moon." And so, yeah, so if the sun is given the same shadows as the neighborhood stuff, and then it's the same as the moon. So I went out the next day, and it wasn't the same. I shot a an electrical box, and the electrical box was at a 30-degree angle going the other way, went straight up to the moon. I'm like, that's not the same angle. It's just not. Um, so I think a month ago, or maybe what is this, July? I think maybe in May, I was doing some other observations, and I had a baseball with me, and I set it up on my tripod, and I took some shots of the baseball and the moon was just a pinpoint in the distance. But I wanted to show that I had the baseball and the moon in the same shot,
Right.
and
Right.
then
Like you were trying to line them up.
right,
Like the baseball wasn't over here,
right,
on one side of the shot and the moon over there. You were trying to sort of
right,
juxtapose them. Yes.
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And then what I did is I zoomed in on the moon, and then I just went into paint and put the moon above the baseball, and you can see that the lines aren't the same.
Huh. Interesting. Because every time I've tried that, they've matched. Now it is tough because there's a lot of atmospheric lighting on the baseball or the white ball that you use.
Hmm.
Whereas the moon is in like the blackness of space, so that the terminator line is very vivid on the moon, whereas the terminator line is less vivid on the baseball because it's being lit from all sides with everything else that's being lit by the sunlight.
Hmm.
But the pattern should pretty much match. The pattern and the angle should pretty much match. Did you take photographs of that?
Yeah.
I mean, like, have you posted them? Like, I thought you had a video.
I don't think that I did a compilation of that one just yet. I just haven't gotten around to it. I just did it for my own observations.
Yeah. Fair enough.
But I think if I was going to rest on anything, I would just rest on the very first video that I put out, which was the electrical box, which clearly had a 30-degree angle as opposed to the moon's 80. I mean, that one was absolutely, you could not get away from that one.
Yeah,
I
have to look at that.
Yeah. So I mean, but see, that's the thing. The thing that we have to do with is that I was arguing with someone on Facebook, and he's like, "Show me some pictures of your flat Earth." I'm like, "I'm not going to show you pictures because you're just going to dismiss them, just like I would dismiss pictures of space." That's not the issue that we need to argue. We need to argue the issues that we can do here on Earth in our own experience, because I'm not going to be up 120,000 feet taking pictures, and neither are you.
Right.
And you can show me pictures with curvature. I can show you pictures without curvature. So that's not going to help us at all.
Right.
So just in fact, what you said was, well, I did it too, and they all matched up. I'm like, okay, well, whatever.
Yeah, I'd be interested in seeing your, like the thing is,
Yeah,
I
can send them to you.
I never want to dismiss anyone's evidence, and that's the thing. It's like if you're a first person witness to this. Like you're
Right.
you're not showing me photographs that some other guy took. You know, you saw this with your own eyes. You took photographs of it, and you know, I'm interested.
Well, you
Um,
can check it out on my channel. You can see the footage that I did shoot of my neighborhood. I think that
oh,
would be
okay.
just
So
as.
it's the first video on your channel
I
where you talk
believe
about the
so. If you
electrical
go
box.
down,
Okay.
I think I've got it listed from the most recent. So I think if you scroll all the way down, you'll come across
Yeah. The,
uh,
the thing about angles can be very misleading, especially like
blah
look if you
blah
say
blah blah. Angles, that's it's just we're
are
trying to make it fit.
are
We're
you
trying to
interested?
make it fit.
Are you interested in what I was going to say?
I know. I'm just
All
giving you a
right.
bad time. Yeah, yeah.
So the thing, because like I've got a photography background. I was trained as a black and white darkroom photographer, and I worked as a photojournalist, um, and had a whole ton of front page photos on the newspaper, and so like I've studied this stuff, and one of the things that I've always found fascinating is when shadows don't go in the right direction. Like for example, like I've seen it with my own eyes, like with the sun. The sun is out, and I'm looking at like either it's a building or it's like maybe an air conditioner sticking out of a window on a building, and then I'm looking at the lines, and the lines don't seem to go in the quote unquote correct direction. And the thing is, I'm one of these people where I like a puzzle. I like something to kind of sink my teeth into. The moon terminator illusion is a great example of that. How if the moon seems to be lit from the upper left, as you said, how come the sun is at the lower left?
Right.
And so the thing about your electrical box, and I have not seen your video, so I'm just sort of talking off the top of my head, is that I can imagine that it's a panel or it's a box that's sort of sticking off of a plane surface, plane surface, and that the lines or the sun coming in at an angle, it depends not only on the box, but it also depends on the angle of the plane. The whether it's a building or a wall or something. So it's
Mm-hmm.
like I'm very interested in seeing that footage.
Mm-hmm.
But can I talk about the moon terminator illusion? Um,
This is your time, Chet. You can talk about whatever you like.
uh, so, oh, and hey, there's Larry Siebens. I'm sorry if I
Hey,
mispronounced
Larry.
your name. So, Larry, we have not spoken yeah, Larry's favorite line is, Chet, you're a, or Charles, you're a flat earther, and you know it. So, the moon terminator illusion. Now, I'm going to try to blow your mind a little bit. Can you imagine sort of being in a fog that is like a ground level fog where you cannot see the ground, you can only see the sky? I mean, I'm just trying to sort of play with the idea here. Maybe you're on the top of an observation deck or something, and so you literally can't see the ground. It just has disappeared. You can see the sun just fine, and you can see the moon just fine. I'm trying to set up something where you lose sight of the ground. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then what you do is you take your camera and or take your tripod, and you shorten the leg on one side of the tripod, so the tripod is literally leaning over, so that like
Uh-huh.
the tripod shaft, the
Yeah, I follow. Yep.
and then what you do is you draw a line in the sky, you draw a line between the sun and the moon, and you try to have the tripod shaft, the column, be perpendicular to this, so that if you were to pan, and then you lock down the legs, right? So you're the column of your
With
tripod
one of the legs shortened.
with one of the, like, so maybe you have to hold it so it doesn't fall over. Okay. But the point is that the column of the tripod must be perpendicular to the visual line that you can draw between the sun and the moon in the sky. All right.
Well, how can that happen if you've got a shortened leg?
No. I mean, maybe you have a partner, maybe you have a partner who's holding the tripod down so it doesn't fall over. But what I'm trying to say is, if you're looking up in the sky and like take a ruler up in the sky and just connect the sun and the moon with this ruler.
Yeah.
Well, it's going to be at an angle. Like that, you said the sun was lower in the sky and the moon was higher in the sky. Okay, so you've got this crazy angle.
Okay.
So then you set up your tripod so that the column of the tripod is perpendicular to that, and that usually means you shorten one leg. Now, here's
okay, stop. Let me stop you.
Okay, sure.
Only for clarity's sake.
Sure.
Okay. When you say the column, you mean the point of contact where you're going to affix your camera.
Right. Like when you do a panning maneuver, it's sort of swiveling on the column.
Okay. All right. And you've got one of the legs shortened so that it is angled to, let's say, for instance, the right.
Let's use your example where you said the moon was high and it was being lit from the left, and then you saw the sun was on the left, but the moon,
Yeah, but I
the
guess
sun
what
was
I'm trying
lower.
to understand is why are you shortening a leg?
You're just making I mean, you could do this by tilting the camera in your
Why are
hands.
you doing that?
Okay, so here's the money shot. Here's what I want you to do is you take your camera and then you could pan from the moon to the sun, like without tilting the camera up or down, because this column is now perpendicular. So just a simple pan maneuver, meaning just a horizontal sweep, will have the moon in the shot, and then you pan over and you can see the sun.
Okay, so I think I'm following you now. So if you've got an angle between the moon and the sun, you're saying that you are shortening the legs so that your camera is perpendicular to that angle.
Right. So in other words, the bottom of the frame should be parallel to the line that connects the sun and the moon.
Okay. Yeah.
Now, are you sitting down?
Yeah.
So when you look at the moon in this fashion, the moon will be lit perfectly from the left-hand side, when you pan left and you see the sun. In other words, the moon's illumination will 100% perfectly point to the sun. Because
I understand what you're saying. So is this an observation that you've made?
It's an observation that I've figured out using. I've imagined
in your mind,
it.
like Copernicus and Kepler.
I'll be happy to go out and try it. But the point that I'm trying to make to you, I know you're teasing. The point I'm trying to make to you is that if you eliminate your horizon, like the horizon in the real world where it's got trees and houses and stuff, if you eliminate
if you take out all the variables that prove your point, if you take all of those away, then my point remains.
No, so all I'm trying to say is when people say the moon is higher in the sky versus the sun is higher in the sky, it's relative to your horizon.
Do you know what you're doing right now?
What am I doing right now?
You are in a sense begging the question. You are wanting your position to be true, so you create a scenario in which it is. So instead of hold on. So let's just change this back. And if I was walking with my 6-year-old, and I said to my 6-year-old before he was indoctrinated, and I was just trying to get him to use simple empirical observations, and I said, "Little Johnny, look up at the sun. And now look over at the moon. Do they look the same size, Johnny?" "Yes, Daddy." "Why do you think that is, Johnny?" "Because they're the same size, Daddy."
That would be a good first guess.
Okay. Yeah. No. Right. But when you then begin to argue for how the sun is actually bigger, there is something that you are imagining or presupposing or basing your construct on in order to show that the sun is in fact bigger, rather than simply looking at the sun and the moon and seeing that they're the same size. So I would have to then talk Johnny out of trusting his eyes. Actually, Johnny, it's 93 million miles away and a million times bigger, which he can't even fathom because he's only 6. But what I'm saying is that you have to then talk yourself out of what you obviously observe.
Well, yes, it's what you obviously observe, but it's what you conclude after observing that. That's the tough part. So if you look at the moon and you look at the sun, preferably with a solar filter, and you can observe that they're both the same angular size in the sky, yes, the first pass, first top of the head conclusion is, okay, they're the same size. Okay, I'm going to 100% give you that. All right. But hopefully, if you're logical enough, you would know that there is no guarantee that you see these two things and they look the same angular size. You could say, okay, they could actually be the same physical size. That is one possibility. Another possibility is one is twice as far and twice as big, right? So, I mean, I'm hoping that this initial top of the head conclusion that they're the same size is not like the end of the whole conversation. I'm hoping that you would entertain that that's one possibility. They're the same physical size, but another possibility is that one is twice as far and twice as big,
Yeah.
etc.
I
Do
would love
you see
to.
what I'm saying?
Oh, sure, sure. I would love to have a Freaky Friday scenario where I trade places with my seventh grader, and I go into his classroom knowing what I know now. I would not let the teacher get away with the BS that's going to come out of his mouth to tell and teach the students how to unthink what they observe with their eyes. So to say to you that the sun and the moon are the same size, and you were to say, well, what if I told you they weren't? I would say, okay, so what evidence do you have? Okay, now your entire construct would then have to be presented to me in its entirety. Okay, because it all is intricately connected. Now, I've actually thought about this. I have two books in my mind. One book is The Globe Has No Clothes, and it's little Johnny in his first day in kindergarten, where he asks the teacher.
Are these books that you are thinking of writing, or do they actually exist?
I started writing this one.
Okay.
Where little Johnny is asking his science teacher how water doesn't fall off a ball.
Right.
And all these. Anyway, the other one is someone going into an indigenous village that has never met a Westerner before, and he is then introducing them to the marvels of Western civilization, and he then has to then tell them that they're actually on a spinning ball, and that the moon is 93 million miles away.
Meaning the sun.
Yeah, the sun is 93 million miles away. And I would be interested to see something. It would be very interesting to have someone who comes into that knowledge as an adult and looks at the person thinking, you're insane. You're insane. What you just told me? No, I'm sorry.
Well, okay, so try this on for size. The thing is, if you're truly open-minded, then you have to acknowledge that one possibility is that the sun and the moon are the same size, or the sun's twice away and twice as big,
there's no
or
or.
the sun is
There's
400 times.
You have to have a presupposition to bring in the or.
Well, no, because the thing is, what you're saying is that the first glance at something, like you have a book and you look at the cover and you're like, oh, that looks like it's a good book, and then boom, it's now a good book. You don't even have to open it. You've decided it's a good book. You don't even have to read it. Do you see what I mean?
No, like that's a false equivalency. That's not the same.
I'm trying to make an analogy, because what you're saying,
you're failing. Try another one.
What you're saying is that when you observe that the sun and the moon are the same angular size, you're saying that, okay, the first conclusion I'm going to draw is that they're the same physical size. And then anything after that, that's just a presupposition.
Here would have been a better analogy. And this is because of something that we're familiar with in this discussion, is the issue of perspective. So if a better analogy would have been to bring up mirages. So if you're out in the desert and you think that you see an oasis ahead of you, and you keep walking towards it and you never get there, okay? Your eyes are not tricking you. They're not tricking you. You're not being deceived by Mother Nature. Mother Nature is communicating to you in the precise way that she ought. However, you need to understand the dynamics of atmospheric evaporation, distortion, reflection, and all that kind of stuff. Okay.
Well, that kind of proves my point.
No,
You're arguing on my side.
No. I'm not arguing for your side. So
because it looks like water, so I'm going to say it is water.
Sure.
Right. Sure. It looks like water. It is. Right. Therefore, it is water.
Right. Well,
now, if you're going to tell me about some mirage stuff,
it is to a certain extent, because vapor is.
No, I mean liquid water. It looks like liquid water, therefore it is liquid water.
Sure. Right.
So I'm stuck in a prison, and I'm looking through the bars, and I see this lake over there, a couple miles away. Therefore, it's water. I can't get there because I'm in prison. And and that's the end of the discussion. And then you come in, you're like, well, wait a minute, there could be it's a mirage. And be like, no, you're presupposing that light can bend. Do you see how
No.
I'm arguing the simplistic notion and you're arguing the big picture?
Let me go back to what I initially brought up with the sun and the moon being the same size, and your suggestion that they might not. So
just entertain the possibility.
No,
have that as being one of the possibilities.
I don't have to entertain the possibility because I was in that system. I know that possibility. Okay, so all I'm saying is that the alternative to the sun and the moon being the same size has to be justified, just like I would say, you're crazy, I see water ahead.
No, absolutely not, because then you have to justify that they're the same physical size. Just because they appear the same physical size, I mean, you know that there are a range of possibilities. Like if you were to have a spectrum, you could say the moon is actually much bigger than the sun. That's a possibility. The moon could be twice as far away and twice as big than the sun, or they could be the same size, or the sun could be twice as big and twice as far. There is a spectrum of possibilities. You can't just say, oh, I'm only going to have the middle of the spectrum, and I'm going to say that's the conclusion unless I have evidence otherwise. No, you have to say the whole spectrum is possible.
Okay, so let me ask you this question. Let's pretend like we're having this conversation, and I'm the indigenous aborigine. Okay. And you're saying the sun and the moon are not the same size.
If you were indigenous, I'd be like, show me your medicine.
We're 10 years years into and I'm gonna show you that the marijuana plant cures Alzheimer's, and you're gonna put a ban on it and give me a pill.
No, I believe drugs should be legalized.
Yeah. Anyway, so let's say we're 10 years into it, and you're like, okay, this guy's ready for astronomy. I'm gonna blow his mind and tell him that the sun is 93 million miles away. Okay, so my question to you is, what's your basis for saying that?
Yeah, well, that's the problem, is that I would not try to convince anybody, and I mean anybody, that the sun is 93 million miles away. I would not try to convince any skeptic.
Is the sun bigger than the moon?
Because the story, that's a little bit easier.
What's your justification for saying? Yeah. How do you know that?
Well, because we can observe that the moon orbits the Earth, and we can observe that the Earth orbits the sun. I'm not going to put a number on the distance of the sun. That's a long conversation.
Let me slow down and restate what you just said.
Sure.
You know that the sun is larger than the moon because the moon orbits the Earth, and the Earth orbits the sun.
Yes.
How do you know that?
If you make a careful study of the motions of the moon and the sun, through 365 days, you can come to no other conclusion, especially if you observe the other planets, and then you observe the patterns of the planets, and then you get that they are orbiting the sun as well.
So if I observe the sun and the moon in their circuit, as well as the zodiacal signs, and as well as the 6 other, I suppose, wandering stars.
Yeah, careful study will reveal.
Careful study.
Well, yeah, and that's the thing where a lot of flat earthers really fall down on the job, is that they, like you mentioned stars and planets, and they're like, oh, they're just lights in the sky. And I was thinking my analogy is like, you go to the most expensive Italian restaurant in New York City, 5-star restaurant, and an entree is $100. And you're like, you know what? It's just pasta in a bowl. It's just pasta in a bowl. I'm going to go and make some ramen noodles. It's just pasta in a bowl. And it's like, what an insult to this, this chef that created this wonderful meal that, yes, it was made of pasta, and yes, it has sauce, and yes, it's in a bowl. But it's like, it just saying, oh, it's pasta in a bowl means that you have no discernment between ramen noodles and $100 meal in New York City. Do you see what I'm saying? So it's like, careful study. Then do some careful study. If you just say lights in the sky, that means you're just not even interested. You're not even interested in paying attention. And that's really revealing. Are you lighting up?
I'm just trying to process your argument in terms of the circuit of the celestial lights. Because again, I think that if we were gonna have the time to have this kind of a discussion, I think that we would be able to peel back the onion far enough so that we could reveal the presuppositions of the system that you are holding on to, that are a part of. It's not. So my initial knee-jerk reaction is, I don't think it's quite that simple.
Yes, you are correct. It is not that simple, but careful study has to be part of the equation. So I hope you can acknowledge that somebody just saying they're just lights in the sky and they just walk away, versus somebody saying, hey, they're lights in the sky, but I'm interested in studying their patterns. Like one person has a sense of curiosity and the other person's just like, I'm just not even going to look up.
All right. So when Copernicus was doing his observations and he was noticing the retrograde motions of certain wandering stars.
Yes.
How did he conclude what led him to the Copernican revolution? Okay,
so to answer your question, I'm just going to give you an analogy, because you said, well, not an analogy, but you use the word presupposition, and that's kind of like,
well,
it's
not
like,
in my question.
It's flat versus a globe, and so I'm presupposing it's a globe. So what the way I'm going to answer your question is if you start with a blank slate. You start with a completely blank slate and you put on that slate your observations.
Let me just stop you real quick. The only reason why is because I think that you are misdirecting right now, because I'm asking you about what Copernicus did. It's almost like I'm asking you what Eratosthenes did, and you give me an analogy. I'm not asking for an analogy.
Well, all right. So the short version is that they knew that the globe Earth.
I'm sorry. They knew what? They knew what?
They knew that the globe Earth
I'm sorry, they knew what?
That the globe Earth either orbited the sun.
How did they know it was a globe?
That came 1,000 years before. So you were talking about Copernicus, right?
Oh, okay. Okay. So well, since now that you've now given Copernicus 1,000 years head start.
Right. Yes.
Where did he learn that from? Okay.
Well,
where did he learn that from?
But anybody who carefully studies the sky will conclude that the Earth is a globe. So, but you were asking specifically about Copernicus. Can I answer your question about Copernicus, or do you want to just talk about the globe?
No, I'm going to ask you where the person that taught Copernicus that it was a globe learned that it was a globe.
Well, it was common knowledge. Everybody knew it was a globe.
Oh, they did. Okay.
Yes.
And what's your proof for this?
Well, no, there's no proof. It's just if you read any of their writings.
Everybody knew.
Well, I mean, of course, not the indigenous people.
That's what you said.
Africa,
That's what you said. How do you know?
Any educated person? Any educated person knew.
Wow.
Okay? And I'm sure there was a lot of people who were not.
And were they educated by the system?
Presumably, but what I'm saying is that their observations do not conflict with reality. That's the thing.
Were there any geocentrists in Kepler's time?
Geocentrist. Well, you know what the word geocentrism means? Because flat earthers misuse it. The word geocentrism means you believe the globe Earth is the center of the solar system.
Okay.
All right. A geocentrist believed that the solar system orbits the globe Earth.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But lately, just in the last couple of years, flat earthers have sort of, they've sort of hijacked the term geocentrist to mean a flat earther who believes that the stars and everything above us, rotates around our North Pole, but that the Earth is essentially not moving. But a real geocentrist, the historical word geocentrist, meant that the globe Earth was at the center of everything. I mean, the universe, but essentially the solar system. The sun orbited us, the planets orbit us, the moon orbits us.
Point taken. Understood.
The stars orbit us. So, but if you want me to answer your question about, was it Copernicus? It's that the two models at the time, I mean, and the two models were sort of competing, was the geocentric one, which was the globe Earth is orbited by the sun, moon, and stars and planets. And then the other one is that the sun is at the center of our solar system and we orbit it, and the moon orbits us. And the thing is, you can kind of argue it either way. Now, the thing is, you could argue the geocentric version only if you have epicycles to explain the retrograde motion of the planets. Like that's a bit of a complication where you have these very complicated cycles of these spirals, so that you get, these other planets to literally move backwards against the background stars. And then, or you could just solve it by saying, well, the Earth isn't at the center, the sun's at the center. And then all of a sudden, all the motions, they just make sense with pure simplicity. All right.
Mm-hmm.
But that's starting from a globe. Now, if you want to talk about how they knew the globe, well, you got to back up the clock about 2,000 years.
Sure. Yeah. So what are the primary sources for that?
Well, just careful observation of the sun, moon, and stars.
No, I'm asking you for primary sources.
Oh, well, primary sources. I mean, that's kind of silly. Primary sources is like, I'm talking to a guy who witnessed it. And it's like, no, I don't have a primary source. It's, and then you could say this whole history is bunk. But if you look up Archimedes, and if you'll recall, Archimedes was the guy, I think he was the guy who, he was given a problem about, there was this crown that was sort of gilded in gold, and the king sort of suspected that it was not real. I mean, it was just, it had a veneer of gold, and that it was made of something else. Are you familiar with the story? Maybe the story is a myth or legend.
No.
So the story goes that there was this crown, this wonderful piece of jewelry that looked gold, but that it was suspected that it was not actually pure gold. It maybe just had a veneer. And so Archimedes, and of course they didn't want to destroy it. I mean, of course you could prove the point by melting the thing down. And it's like, but they didn't want to, because it was a beautiful piece of jewelry. And so Archimedes, and again, this story could be just a legend, that was made up by, a storyteller. But the story goes that Archimedes was sitting in his bathtub, and he noticed that when he sat in his bathtub, the water level rose,
Sure.
And then so he figured out, well, then if you took the crown
and didn't he say Eureka?
Water, and then he said Eureka, and he ran down the street naked. I mean, maybe the story never happened. But if you read his writings on the properties of water, because I mean, that was like his thing, is like density, buoyancy, water. He wrote a bunch of these laws. He talks about the surface of a still body of water. Are you familiar with this reference? Because most flat earthers are not. Archimedes, and again, this is, I don't know, 2,500 years ago. Somebody's going to Google it. He wrote in that the surface of a body of water is going to be convex, with the center point being the center of the earth. In other words, even if you're looking at a pond that is just a mile wide, that's going to be 1 mile of arc, where the center of that arc is the center of the earth.
I get it. Yeah. Spherical trigonometry. I get that.
But he knew that 2,500 years ago.
No, he presupposed it, because let's go to the myth of the story then of Aristotle, right? Aristotle supposedly knew that the earth was curved, or at least surmised that it was, because he saw ships going over the horizon.
Yeah, he had a whole list of things of why he knew it. Ships going over the horizon was one
that's fine, but that's the only one that I've heard that's cited as something for Aristotle to be attached to. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's suppose for the moment that the Earth is flat, and Aristotle made that observation. Let us suppose that Archimedes.
You mean presuppose? I'm just teasing.
Yeah. I choose my words wisely, Chet.
Okay,
That's
go ahead.
Why
Go ahead.
And so then let's suppose, because I don't know timelines, that Archimedes follows Aristotle as a trusted source. And if Aristotle thought that the world was round, then it must be round. So then Archimedes is operating upon a presupposed construct of a circular Earth, so that his spherical trigonometry, in theory, is correct. However, if the Earth, and this is where I was going to bring us back, because again, you took us to the heavens, and that is one of the biggest no-nos in flat Earth discussion. And that is that we do not deduce from what we see above to impose it upon what is
that's
below.
That's because of a lack of study. And you're presupposing a flat Earth, like the whole analogy with the
Well,
planetarium.
so I wouldn't say that I'm presupposing a flat Earth. I would say that I am looking at the world and observing it with my eyes and drawing conclusions based upon what I see.
Sure.
That's not a presupposition.
Well, but the
However,
comparison about you can't study the ceiling and understand the shape of the floor, that presumes that it's a floor, and floors are always flat. The floor of a planetarium is always flat, so that sort of presupposes that it's a flat Earth.
Unless it's a stadium seating.
Yeah, but the analogy that people give, I mean, I will give you that point, but the analogy that people give is
Okay.
use the word floor.
So my point back to that is that, okay, so I would like to imagine myself being a flat earther back in 1968.
Okay.
And in 1969, when we get the photograph of the Earth, I would call bullshit.
Right, because space doesn't exist.
No, not even that.
All right.
Not even that. The Earth is flat. That's not a real picture. No, we went to space. Yeah, you can tell me that all you want. The reason why I'm saying that picture is false is because the Earth is flat. It's not round. It's not round.
Right. So it's all fake. So all the evidence is fake.
No. Don't go there. You don't have to go there. Just follow
but you do have to go there. I mean, if you say that they went to space, took all these pictures, then it's all fake.
No, okay,
go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. My point is that the Aborigine indigenous person who understands physics knows that water does not conform and stick to the surface of an object.
Yeah,
he understands.
Right, but heliocentrists know that also. That's a straw man. That's a classic straw man. And for you to bring that up,
it's
okay.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so let me ask you then. Okay, so fine. Let me ask you.
Such a straw man.
Okay, go ahead. How is it a straw man?
Well, for starters, there isn't a single heliocentrist out there who claims that water sticks to the outside of a shape, that shape being planet Earth. Zero. Water doesn't stick to anything other than like the wetting action, which is only a few molecules or, surface tension, whatever,
Sure.
a millimeter or something, or a half a millimeter. That's what water sticks to. You stick something in water, you bring it out, it's wet. But no one's claiming that water is sticking to Earth. Zero people are claiming that. And zero people are claiming that it conforms to the shape. Like, we don't talk about the ocean that is covering Mount Everest, right? What we do say is that there is something called the geoid, or, you could call it the equipotential.
I feel like you're splitting hairs to a certain
all right, so
extent.
you can call it a sphere, but I mean, it's a little bit of it's an ellipsoid.
Okay, let me say it this way.
But it doesn't conform to the shape, though. That's the point. It does not conform to the shape, and it's not sticking to the shape. Those two things are really important.
I would call you a spin doctor.
That's because you like the phrase spinning ball. That's another straw man. The Earth is not a spinning ball.
No.
And water doesn't stick to it.
No, I'm calling you a spin doctor because you're blowing air up my skirt to make me feel... No,
and
listen.
It's a lovely skirt.
Listen. Don't miss the forest for the trees in terms of what I am actually addressing. Okay? If you want to, because actually, as a matter of fact, the same kid that I was referring to that was going toe-to-toe with me about his heliocentrism and mine said, "What, did you not go to school?
Oh, okay. Yeah, do
you not understand that
right. Argument
water,
to authority.
No, he's just saying, did you not go to school? Because that's where we learned that with regard to the Earth, water does conform to the outside shape.
Yeah, I've never heard anybody say that.
Well,
the only people I've heard say that are flat earthers.
I can send you the screenshot.
Okay.
And this guy was going toe-to-toe with me.
Yeah.
All I'm saying, okay, so don't look. Okay,
and there are some bad teachers out there. So I'm going to give you that point. There are a lot of bad teachers. There's a lot of bad science teachers
Yeah.
A lot of horrible math teachers. And so, don't get me started on that. So
Sure.
that could be part of it.
Let's not miss sight of, and let's not miss the point. My point, and I think most of us is that water does not maintain a static nature on an angle without structure and containment.
Oh, okay, so like it cannot stand shear forces, right? So like you can't pour water in a bucket and then have the surface of the water be at a 30-degree angle to the floor, right?
Correct. Or if you
Okay.
dropped an
Right.
object into that,
So-
you wouldn't then have.
So here's the question for you: how do you define the word angle? I mean, like I would argue that you're correct. The water cannot form an angle. Like you can't pour water in a bucket and have it maintain a 30-degree angle unless you're on a merry-go-round or something. So like define the word angle. Because I would say that angle has to be a horizontal plane. The surface of the water has to be flat, locally flat, with respect to the what they call the normal, or if you draw a line and draw it towards the center-ish of the Earth, of course, the rotation of the Earth affects that. So they call the geoid, so it's this ellipsoid. So it's like if you define the word angle, well, locally that angle is straight down, or locally that angle is flat. And I agree with you. It can't handle these shear forces. Did
you write speeches for Bill Clinton?
Oh my goodness. Well, you see, so here's the thing. And then shout out to Charlie in the chat. And I'm only glancing at the chat, but shout out to Charlie because he says calling a flat earth math a spin doctor because he's being careful with his terminology when he was just all prickly about terminology. So the thing is, you're calling me a spin doctor, but I try to be very precise with my language. So like water sticking. No, don't say sticking. You could say gravity. Water is drawn by gravity.
We're talking about Charles, to whom I'm speaking.
Yes.
Flat Earth Math.
Yes.
And Charles in the chat.
Oh, not Charlie. It's Charlie. He's an astronomer.
I'm sorry, Charlie.
Charlie
the astronomer.
And he's a legit astronomer.
Excellent. Fantastic. My point is that it's like someone. What was I just watching about? Someone who is talking about. I watched this thing on Facebook. It was about this photocopier where they had this exchange, this real life exchange of a courtroom scenario where this witness was not wanting to answer this question about a photocopier. It was pretty funny.
Okay.
But the point was that he was splitting hairs and making a distinction, and the prosecutor was like, "I'm talking to you in the common vernacular. This is the way we speak." Right. So when I say that water sticks to the side, Charles, you know what I mean.
Right, but it doesn't stick to the side. Like that's one of the hugest. No,
it does.
No, it doesn't. That is one of the hugest misunderstandings in the flat Earth debate.
Okay, so here we go.
They're literally pictures, and you've seen this because I know DIRTH has this in his slideshow.
DITRH.
I'm sorry, deep in DI. What did I say?
In the rabbit hole. You said deep. You said DIRTH.
Oh, I'm sorry. Because dearth, right? Because John Labano, he's called him dearth. But yes, DITRH.
I got your back, David.
Yeah. There's a picture, and you've seen this, where it's a soaking wet tennis ball, but somebody gives it a wicked spin, and they shoot it with a high speed shutter, and you see these spirals of water spinning off this spinning ball, and it's like water doesn't stick to a spinning ball. It's like, I agree with you. Water doesn't stick to a spinning ball. The Earth is not a spinning ball, but if you actually run the numbers, then the centrifugal force is extraordinarily small, measurable but extraordinarily small.
Mm-hmm. But the great negation, the scale negator.
No. Now you're simplifying things. No. I'm not just going to say it's the great scale negation.
Listen, if you're allowed to simplify things, I'm going to simplify things.
I'm going to say if you run the numbers. See, here's the thing about
the numbers that presuppose a globe. Okay.
No. Listen, if you're going to argue against the globe model, then use the numbers in the globe model. So you could say, I'm presupposing. No, it's like if you're going to argue against this thing, the globe that heliocentrists
we're off track, Charles.
Right?
Can we get back Can we get back on track to
but
the
all right,
point
so
that
I
was
want to
simply
talk
trying to
about
make?
the water sticking to the sides. Do you know what the Borg cube is? Are you
Oh
familiar
my
with that
word.
from Star Trek?
No,
Okay,
I'm not a
so it was
Trekkie.
this. Yeah, I mean, neither am I, but like I watched the Next Generation,
So
and
now
that
we're
was.
talking
And,
about a complete
well, I just want to
entertainment
give you an
system that is based
just
upon a heliocentric
I just want to
monoworm.
give you an example. All
Okay,
right.
go ahead.
Let's say you have a planet that was the size of Earth. It was like 8,000 miles
Let's
big.
just pretend that this world is not
Come on,
flat.
just entertain me for 30 seconds.
Okay,
So
go
you
ahead.
have a planet that's the size of the Earth, but it's made of solid granite and it's in the shape of a cube.
I'm
Okay.
sorry. I'm so sorry, man. Does this world actually exist? Is
No,
this?
I'm just making this up. I'm just trying to
Oh,
show you something. I'm
I.
trying to, but stop interrupting me. I asked for 30 seconds and you gave me
Okay,
5.
I'm sorry.
Give me 30 seconds.
I don't know if I can do it,
Oh
Charles.
my goodness. Hold your breath. Okay. So you've got a planet that is roughly the size of Earth, made of solid granite. In other words, it doesn't have a molten core or whatever. And it's the shape of a cube. And then what you do is you have a rain cloud that covers this planet, and it rains for 40 days and 40 nights, and it creates oceans, and it creates oceans on all 6 sides. Okay. So in other words, what I'm trying to say is the water of the oceans is equally distributed around the whole thing. And what you will see is what appears from a third party observer to be a blue water sphere that is intersecting a cube. In other words, they're concentric. A concentric sphere and a concentric with a cube. It will literally look like a sphere of water is actually intersecting this cube, even though it's a solid cube. So like there's no holes in the cube. Am I making sense? So here's my point.
I'm sorry.
The
I
water is
cannot
not conforming to the
envision.
shape. The water is not conforming to the outside of the shape. That's the big thing that flat
You
earthers
do
say all the
realize
time.
the one hole in your entire scenario is
Okay.
you've just imagined this. You've just pictured. You said just imagine
Well,
what I'm
but
going to
that's what a
tell you.
heliocentrist would argue. If you asked a heliocentrist, if we poured water, a billion tons of water, enough that it makes oceans on all 6 faces of this Borg
Okay,
cube
let me
planet,
just
that's what
stop
it would
you.
make.
Let me
It would make a sphere.
Stop you, Charles. Okay, I'm going to grant you that there's a sphere out there, and let's say that it is 3,000 miles squared, right? If you pour 1 billion gallons of water on the top of that cube.
Or wait, it's cube or sphere? You just said
Okay,
sphere.
I'm sorry. I misspoke.
I
was trying to go with your cube.
Yes. Okay. So we're talking about a cube.
3,000 because a sphere can't be squared. Didn't I say 3,000 miles squared?
Yeah. All right. So it's 3,000 miles cubed. So 3,000 miles by 3,000 miles by 3,000 miles. I would
Cube.
actually,
Yeah. Blah blah blah.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. And we poured an inordinate amount of water. All of that water would run off of that cube, except for the water that would remain because of surface tension on the top.
All right. So would it run down?
Is what would happen?
Would it run
in real
down?
life.
Like where's down on this cube that is in?
My Buddha.
Yeah, but where's down?
Oh my Buddha.
Because that's the other thing.
I'm not talking to you anymore if you don't know what down is.
No, down is a local phenomenon here standing on Earth. But if you're in space, there is no up or down. Up or down.
Yeah.
I mean, like that's why when you see the folks on the ISS,
in space and you pour the inordinate amount of water, it would encapsulate the cube and it would actually be a sphere.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, but you don't need the silly accent. But yes, that's correct.
No, I do because you're. Yeah, I mean,
okay.
I know, dude.
But that's the only point I was trying to make. It's a silly example, but the only point I'm trying to make is that no heliocentrist is claiming that water is conforming to the shape of Earth.
That's because he knows it's impossible, and so he has to be a spin doctor and totally talk out his ass about a cube that's encapsulated by water.
Heliocentrists acknowledge that gravity exists. I know you don't acknowledge gravity exists, but that's okay. Yeah. So getting back to the shape of the Earth, you can actually figure out the shape of the Earth by studying the heavens. Like that was one of the big things you said. Is like how could I tell that the that the moon orbits us, and then that we orbit the sun. And it's through careful study. And the thing is that, ancient peoples, they thought the earth was flat, but they thought the heavens were a sphere. And that's a really, really key point that a lot of flat earthers miss, because, people talk about, oh, this culture said this was flat and this culture said this was flat. And it's like, yeah, all that is true, but they knew the heavens were spherical. They knew that the sun went around the earth. So if you picture your local environs, it does appear to be sort of flat. But the sun does go around it. The sun literally goes down behind the horizon. It does not go parallel to the horizon. I'm amazed that anybody could live on the equator or near the equator, like in the tropics, where the sun goes down at a 90-degree angle or close to a 90-degree angle, when it's supposed to be going parallel to the horizon. I can't believe that anybody is a flat earther who's in the tropics. Do you understand what I'm saying? Locally, it looks flat.
I would have to be down there and observe it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the thing is, if you who's the guy? Phuket Word. He's photographed the sun.
It's actually Phuket.
Is it Phuket?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm sorry. I'm giving it an English spin. So he's photographed the moon with the sun with a solar filter. Mm-hmm. And he photographed it repeatedly throughout the day. And it was on a day where there was a few sunspots. You could recognize the pattern of sunspots. There was a sunspot at 3 o'clock, and then there was another 2 sunspots at 7 o'clock or something. And so the sunspots maintained their position in the morning. And then in the afternoon, it's like the thing flipped upside down. And that is exactly what you would expect for an observer on globe Earth witnessing sunspots on the actual sun. Because the sun rises 90 degrees, and then if you go overhead, I mean, you don't lean backwards to watch sunset. It seems silly. You turn around and watch sunset. So therefore, all the sunspots got reversed. But all this stuff just literally doesn't make any sense on a flat plane. There would be no reason why sunspots move at all, especially not upside down on a flat plane.
Yeah. That's why we cannot draw conclusions about what we see above us, because we can't get there. Is there a possibility that there is something in the atmosphere above you?
Nitrous oxide. Sorry.
Okay.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. I was trying to be silly.
It's okay. I'm a big boy.
And we got to wrap this up in a few minutes. And I do have one big thing that I want to share.
Okay. All right. My only question is the variables that are possible in a location where we cannot get leaves me no choice but not to draw conclusions about something I cannot verify.
Except that the Earth is flat.
Because I can observe certain things that lead me to that conclusion. Now, you brought up sunspots. That's fine. Those are phenomenon. That we can say, look at X phenomenon. Both you and I can observe that phenomenon, and both you and I need to put that through our grid and process how that works in our world. That's fine. That's what reality is.
Right.
But my drawing conclusions based on the fact that the world does not produce centrifugal force, and that my observation of the horizon at a distance is flat, and other things that we can delineate. So it's not just this willy-nilly decision to be a flat earther.
Sure. I mean, I see the horizon and it looks flat to me too. So it's I agree with you there. So it's one possibility is that the Earth is flat. Another possibility is that the Earth is really, really huge.
What I'm convinced of, and I can remember thinking this if it was in high school or I don't know. I remember thinking this. How do they know that?
Right.
How do they know?
Well, that's a great question, and you should always keep asking. And that's why I bemoan the lack of good teachers out there. I mean, there are some good teachers who know their stuff, And there are other good teachers is like, well, because it says so in the textbook.
That's what you
You
mean
know,
is
like
that's
why do we know?
are good
Well, because it
politicians
says
and there are poor politicians.
right. But all right, so we gotta close out the show because I want to
Yeah.
keep it close to an hour.
Hit,
So can I
yeah. Yeah.
can
Go.
I and then I'm happy to have round 3, round 4,
Sure.
in future episodes. But what I want to leave you with is the concept of you make an observation and you entertain. It's almost like you have a brainstorming session where it's like no ideas are idiotic, right? So it's like, what
Yeah.
could the shape of the Earth be? It could be a banana, right? It could be a flat plane. It could be a sphere. It could be an inside out donut, So it's like, don't throw anything out. Now we make careful observations and then we start narrowing down. Okay, it's clearly not a banana. Okay, it can't be a banana, but it could be flat or it could be a globe. Let's narrow down the possibilities. So the point I'm trying to make is that if you make careful
Do you know how
observations,
I know it's not a globe?
how?
Because water does not exist in our world at an angle without being contained.
You're correct. Water does not exist at an angle locally. Like where you stand and you drop a plumb bob, the surface of the water will be perpendicular to that plumb bob. I agree with you. Mm-hmm. Anywhere you go on Earth, drop a plumb bob, the resting water will be perpendicular to that plumb bob. I agree with you 100%. Mm-hmm. But that works on a globe. So it's like that observation, which steers you towards the flat, that exact same observation works on a globe. Mm-hmm. That's the point I was trying to make, is you make a careful observation and you just sort of say, okay, so maybe the Earth is not made of cheese. I'm digging with my shovel and I keep coming up with dirt. It's not cheese. Okay, so I'm going to eliminate the cheese theory. Okay. And so that's the point I was trying to make, is like you made a thing about Copernicus or Galileo or Newton or somebody. And you're like, oh, well, this person was just told it was a globe and then they ran with it. And it's like, that's not really how scientists work. They're constantly retreading old ground, because a lot of times they can do it either better or they discover something that the previous people couldn't because they had, their instruments weren't as precise. So they're constantly retreading. There's no instance where people are just handed a textbook and say, okay, we're just going to believe it and we're not going to investigate any of this stuff. That's folklore. So I would like to close out this episode. Can you just give like a minute or less or something, or your final thoughts, and then I'll give my final thoughts, and then we'll close it out.
Sure. My final thoughts, I suppose, would be something along the lines of just echoing what you brought up with Archimedes, what I brought up with Aristotle, and what we have with Eratosthenes, and then the Muslim scientist, I can't remember his name, but
Al-Burundi.
Al-Burundi, okay. The situation in that, because of whether or not we have primary sources or not, I don't know whether or not Archimedes came before Aristotle or whatnot. But if you presuppose, as Eratosthenes did, if you presuppose that the Earth is a sphere, and then you make observations, and then you compute those observations to fit the sphere, you move into the metaphysical. And you move into a place where then you can imagine something being the case and you can make it so. So whether or not you have someone who postulates, well, the Earth is round, and Eratosthenes remembers from his schooling that the Earth was round, and then he makes observations, his observations then are going to conform to that construct. That was my primary, when I started looking into the flat Earth, that was my first impression at like 5 places where I looked up Eratosthenes. As I read these EDU reports on Eratosthenes, my primary impression was he's totally presupposing the construct he wants to prove. And that was just simply them reporting, they weren't arguing global Earth, they were just simply reporting what Eratosthenes did. And based on those at least 5 websites that were all EDUs, as I read those, trying to understand what I was experiencing as I was changing my way of thinking, that was my impression. This guy presupposes his conclusion. So that's what he's going to get.
Okay. And I really thank you for your participation in this hangout. And I really welcome future versions. I really want to keep these things close to an hour just to make it digestible to folks.
Sure. Yeah. No problem.
But just responding, if I could just respond, I know the thing is you won't be able to have a rebuttal because
yeah, you get the last word. I see what you did there.
Right. So, but what I would say is that what oftentimes what flat earthers say is a presupposition is actually an already drawn conclusion. In other words, Eratosthenes already knew that the Earth was a sphere, and he just measured the circumference. Right? It wasn't that he measured the shadows of these sticks, therefore he concluded that the Earth was a sphere. He knew it was a sphere. But anyway, so I would love to talk about this point in a future hangout. Sure. Okay. It's a valid point. Every point you brought up was valid, and I really want to respect that. And I appreciate you coming on. Thank you to everybody in the chat. The people were very civil to each other. I do appreciate that. And I want to big shout out to the Plain Truth. Thank you for being my guest tonight. And
thanks for having me, Charles.
All right. Good night, everybody.